Coming up on Talking Points, the House January 6th committee has wrapped up its final public hearing. We have the details on the subpoena given to former President Donald Trump.
And it's flu season here in New York, and we have the details on the push to get New Yorkers vaccinated for the flu and the target amount of people health officials want to roll up their sleeves this fall.
Plus, Russia's war on Ukraine continues for nearly the 8th straight month. We'll tell you where things stand today. Talking Points starts right now. Good evening and welcome to Talking Points. I'm Chilekasi, Adele.
And I'm Teagan Brown. We have a lot to get into tonight, so let's get started.
Today, President Biden officially launched the online application for federal student debt relief. Qualifying students can now apply at studentaid.gov for up to $20,000 in loan forgiveness.
Last Thursday marked the final hearing for the committee, indicating that the public can expect final conclusions soon. Talking Points analyst Ericka Love is here to give us a recap on the impact of all 9 hearings. Oh, excuse me, I am so sorry. We have a technical difficulty at the moment. Instead, we will jump to the House Oversight Committee has released Secret Service records that show Trump hotels charged the agency more than $1.4 million since 2017. Trump, during his presidency, frequently stayed at properties owned by the Trump Organization, which House Democrats say forced the government to pay higher rates than their usual spending limits. Chairwoman Caroline Maloney, a New York Democrat, says the records raise concerns that the Trump Organization was profiting off of the presidency. A statement issued earlier this afternoon by Eric Trump, who ran his father's business while he served as president, dismissed Maloney's concerns.
In news regarding President Donald Trump, the Biden administration is condemning remarks made by the former president on Truth Social over the weekend. Trump wrote that American Jews need to, quote, get their act together and show more support for the state of Israel, quote, before it is too late. Today, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre called Trump's comments anti-Semitic. Now to this, the House committee investigating the January 6th insurrection has voted to subpoena former President Donald Trump. They're calling the final effort to get his side of the story behind the Capitol attack.
Now, Ericka, let's touch upon the subpoena to former President Trump. Could you walk us through what evidence the committee could possibly hold against Trump?
Yeah, so the subpoena sent out to President Trump, his first response, first of all, was that, it was a witch hunt, it was barbaric for them to even do it in the first place, to ask him to testify. But his biggest response is that, will he end up showing up? And with the subpoena, they will have to decide whether or not, it's worth the process to hold him in contempt of court, in contempt of Congress, if he does not show up. But the biggest thing is, that they could bring across all of these claims from testimonies across the hearings from the last, since June has started. And then the biggest thing is they have 1.5 million pages from the Secret Service and over 1,000 interviews. Here are a few claims made by testifiers. One, that President Trump pressured Republican officials in swing states, that he made plans to join Capitol rioters on the day of January 6th, and that he pressured Vice President Pence to go along with legal strategies to help Trump remain in power. All of these claims have come together to build up a possible case against President Trump that they could present to the Justice Department.
Ericka, what could we expect to see during the release of the final conclusion? What is the ultimate goal of this committee?
Well, Representative Liz Cheney said that they deserve to find the answers, that the American public deserves the answers, whether it's from President Trump, former White House aides, or anybody else that was involved with January 6th. Her biggest goal and the committee's biggest goal is a sense of accountability and the hope that January 6th never happens again. Essentially, we will find a physical put together of a report with their findings, their legal findings, and possible evidence to submit to a higher court to possibly hold against people who were involved with January 6th.
Now, of course, Ericka, there's been discussion of former President Trump running again. Do you think that these hearings are going to have any impact on voters' thoughts if he does ultimately decide to run in 2024?
Well, ultimately, I think it's a difficult conversation to understand. I think President Trump has his ways of reaching out to his sources. There are so many candidates right now across the country who have been endorsed by President Trump, and whether he wins or not, he still will have an influence on how legislation goes in Washington and what the impact will be of his legacy, of his campaign, and of his presidency as time moves on.
Ericka Love, thank you so much.
Now to another investigation surrounding former President Trump. The case involving classified documents found at Trump's Palm Beach estate has now returned to the limelight following a request from the Department of Justice.
The DOJ is now requesting for a special investigation, for the special master review of the case to be suspended. Talking Points analyst Jake Morel is here in studio to tell us more what this means for Trump's legal team. Jake.
Teagan, thanks for having me on.
Now, Jake, let's talk a little bit about a circuit judge approved the request to have this special master, but now ultimately, they're trying to have him removed. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, guys, the DOJ doesn't want this case to have any sort of outside review. They believe that there's no reason that the documents obtained in the Mar-A-Lago raid should be returned to Trump. And since these allegations are pretty serious and possession of classified documents is a pretty serious crime, they don't want anything getting in the way of their prosecution. Now, what they said in their court filings to remove the special master is the uncontested record demonstrates that the search was conducted in full accordance with a judicially authorized warrant, and there has been no violation of the plaintiff's rights, let alone a callous disregard for them. The plaintiff has failed to meet his burden in establishing any need for the seized records. Indeed, a substantial number of them are not even his, or in establishing any irreparable injury in their absence. So basically what this means is that the FBI obtained these documents legally. So there's no reason that the Trump team should have access to them or that any sort of outside review should have access to looking at these documents. And the DOJ does not want that getting in the way of their prosecution.
Jake, there's another appeal from the DOJ. Last month, they won an appeal to continue a criminal investigation with the documents. If they win this appeal as well, what does that mean for Trump and his defense?
Now, just like you said, Chile, they did win an appeal last month. So if they win this appeal as well, then they obviously have the momentum moving forward in this case. But it'll also affect the timeline of the case. Right now, with the special master still on the case, his review of these documents isn't due until the end of November. But if he gets removed, the Trump team has to file a court response by November 10th. So first of all, they'll fast track it. And also, this is just not something that the Trump team wants to see. Since the since the Mar-a-Lago, the taking of documents from Mar-a-Lago in August happened, they've been trying to get a special master to get some sort of outside review on this case, as they don't want a direct criminal prosecution of former President Trump. So if this gets removed, it is not going to look good for them.
And Jake, speaking of bad for the former president, the New York Times reported this week that there is footage of Mar-a-Lago employees moving boxes following the FBI raids. How is the DOJ reacting to this?
Well, Teagan, first of all, former President Trump has had a horrible week. First of all, we saw the DOJ file the appeal to get the special master removed from the case, and now there's security footage of boxes being moved in the Mar-a-Lago estate after the FBI was already there to raid it, to take the evidence out of there. So first of all, what we saw in that video, or not what we saw, the videos in public, but apparently Walt Nauta, who is a former Trump advisor, was seen moving those boxes in those videos, and now he has, according to the New York Times, he's complied with the DOJ and has done an interview with them where he said that Trump ordered him and other Mar-a-Lago employees to move those boxes. So if this is true, Trump is not only facing the possession of classified documents, but he could also be facing obstruction of justice for doctoring that sort of evidence after the FBI was in the Mar-a-Lago estate. So we're kind of seeing these charges potentially pile up for President Trump, and as per this update on the case, things are not looking good for him.
Jake, thank you so much.
Now moving on to the U.S. economy, rapid inflation has led to the biggest increase in Social Security benefits in more than 40 years. Talking Points analyst Anna Salewycz is here with more details about the increase, and how both Republicans and Democrats are reacting to it. So, Anna, thanks for joining us. This Social Security increase largely supported by Democrats. How does the GOP feel about it?
So the GOP doesn't really have a unified plan to combat inflation, but in general, they are very much against this rise in Social Security benefits. They just don't think that it will do enough to combat the high rates of inflation, and a lot of Republicans are blaming Biden for these high inflation rates. We're not really sure if not all Republicans want to completely get rid of Social Security, but some of them definitely do want to fix it, maybe do some discretionary funding instead. So in general, they are just not for these recent developments with Social Security.
Now, Anna, obviously midterms coming up less than a month away at this point, and we've heard a lot of candidates talking about their platforms, talking about what they're running on, but Social Security hasn't really been a popular item that these candidates have discussed. So what impact do you think this announcement is going to have now?
So I think inflation really affects a lot of the older American population more than it does the rest of the population. And this is largely to do with high medical costs. Now, because of that, I think a lot of the older American public might be just motivated to go out to the midterms and vote. And because this is the increase in Social Security benefits is largely supported by Democrats, I think that we can potentially see these older people voting for the Democratic candidate no matter who he or she is.
Talking Points analyst Anna Salewycz, thank you so much. Coming up on Talking Points, flu season is among us and health officials are asking all Americans to roll up their sleeves this fall. We'll discuss how officials here in New York are trying to convince residents to get vaccinated this time around. This and more in 90 seconds.
Did you hear about the pony with a sore throat? He was a little horse. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why couldn't the Why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Where did cats go on vacation? New York.
Hey, welcome back to Talking Points. Across the nation, health officials warning Americans about a possible surge in flu cases during the winter season. With COVID still in the picture and mask regulations no longer required, this season may be more severe than previous years, according to experts. Our Talking Points analyst Adriana Haydarova joins us now to talk about how the U.S. plans to combat possible outbreaks. Adriana, thanks for joining us. Local officials warning New Yorkers about a rise in flu cases. How is the state working to limit the potential surge?
Well, indeed, Chile, there has been a sudden rise of the flu cases, and CDC acknowledges that cases are 13 times higher now than they were around the same time last year. So this can really be attributed to the fact that for the past 2 years we have been self-isolating, and our immunity system has been low across the board, which is why the New York State Department of Health has been pushing out the message for all New Yorkers who are 6 months and older to get vaccinated for the flu vaccine, as well as COVID and even the booster shots.
And the U.S. is still bouncing back from supply chain issues from prior years. So how is it hoping to get these vaccines out to millions of people this month?
Well, we can certainly assume that there will be disruptions to the potential flu vaccine supply because manufacturers are working under a very tight time frame when it comes to formulating and testing and eventually releasing these vaccines. So if there's any problems that will emerge in the production, they will reflect in its delay. But on the bright side, manufacturers are making sure that they could project the supply for the U.S. with as many as 183 million vaccines, which will be accounting for the majority of the U.S. population who are in need of these vaccines.
And some new news about those vaccines. This year's CDC recommending new high-dose vaccines, specifically those who are 65 and older. How are these high-dose vaccines compatible with COVID and booster shots?
Well, understandably, it is a valid concern, and many people are having the same question. And the answer is yes. Having the flu vaccine in addition with the COVID vaccine is safe, and it is even so recommended by professionals so that we can all double shield ourselves in this coming winter harsh season.
Certainly, we'll keep on watching for that for sure. Adriana, thank you, and welcome to the show. Over to Teagan at the wall now.
Thank you, Chilekasi. Well, the U.S. stock market finished with its worst day in nearly 2 years. On Friday, the market closed as the Dow fell nearly 400 points. Officials are citing inflation and high federal rates as the reason why the market is back to March 2020 numbers. Talking Points analyst Noah Gutfleisch is here to break down the market's troubles and the plan to get it back on track. Now, Noah, it's clear that the stock market has been in trouble for a while now, since even March of 2020. What is the plan to get it back on track?
Well, the main reason for the stock market having a lot of issues in the past 2 years, and really the last month especially, has been a very tough one for the market. But the real reason is inflation, and that needs to get under control. Now, there are many ways to possibly control it, but the real thing is that the U.S. government has to figure out what is causing it and how they should address it. There are some other things, such as Fed rates being astronomically high. That is something else that must get under control. And also that bond rates are much higher than they are usually, a 40-year high, actually.
Now, Noah, there was actually a dramatic increase today, almost 500 points. What exactly contributed to that?
Well, we saw last time when the inflation report dropped, and it was much hotter than it was expected to be. The inflation report dropped actually last Thursday, and on Friday the market dropped significantly. So it's potentially a rebound from then, which is why we saw it rebound so much today.
And many experts have warned about a possible recession, saying that this could be possible if the stock market keeps going in this direction. But the White House has claimed that there is no recession. What are they doing to ultimately try to stop that from happening?
Well, the Biden administration has denied that there is a recession, but many people are still very worried about it. In fact, actually, Fox Business reported that 90% of CEOs still believe that we are going to head to recession. Besides that, we have to figure out where it is coming from and thus figure out the solution.
Noah Gutfleisch, thank you so much. Coming up on Talking Points, Russia attacks Ukraine's capital of Kiev earlier today. We have the latest on the attack and the situation on the ground in Ukraine.
Most party fouls are pretty dumb. But if you decide to drink and drive underage, you could lose your license and your freedom. Underage drinking and driving. The ultimate party foul.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Great Britain's economy has faced challenges over the past few weeks. This has resulted in new changes to top positions in Parliament. Talking Points analyst Harrison Calder, who's making his debut, explains how these changes can impact the UK and the rest of the world. So Harrison, let's start out with a little bit of context in this situation. What is the evolving situation between the British government and Liz Truss in her first few weeks as Prime Minister?
Yeah, so Liz Truss became the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom in September 6th, 2022. She then made a trip up to Scotland to see Queen Elizabeth II, who then died 2 days later. So that really just shows the turmoil that Liz has had to go through in her first few weeks. She's had a lot of various things she's had to go through with Ukraine and the energy issues, very much with healthcare, and then of course the cutting of taxes. So all of that has been a big thing for her, and in her 6 weeks as a Conservative candidate now, she's already getting threats from others saying that she should be resigned from office.
And Harrison, she's actually moved on from Kwasi Kwarteng to Jeremy Hunt for UK Chancellor. What does this mean for the economy ultimately?
Yeah, so it's big. Kwarteng, only 38 days as the Chancellor, a very short time, and this is now the fourth UK Chancellor of the year. We see Hunt saying, "We have to be honest with people, and we are going to have to take some very difficult decisions, both on spending and on tax, to get debt falling. But the top of our minds when making these decisions will be how to protect and help struggling families, businesses, and people." So they bring in Hunt. He's a very popular Conservative, one of the leaders of this party, and he's looking to do very big things. And it's also could be a scapegoat type thing with Kwarteng, as you might see that Liz Truss might be trying to save her job, trying to hit a reset button.
And back here in the United States, President Joe Biden recently, said some things about Liz Truss and the British economy. What were his thoughts on this? Yeah, so President Biden, he said the tax cuts are a mistake. He has a strong belief that a lot of countries with a growing economy, they have lacks of sound policy. He sees it very much with the United Kingdom, and he's made a lot of points of it. We now see in the recent days, Truss has started to apologize for a lot of her stances, knowing she's backed up against the wall in some trouble. So she's starting to hear out from other people like President Biden. And they did have meetings in the past, like a couple weeks ago. So they had those talks, and from there they've moved on. Talking Points analyst Harrison Calder, thank you so much. And over to Chilekasi at the Wall.
Teagan, thank you. We're now entering the 8th month of Russia's war on Ukraine. Earlier today, Russia launching a drone attack over the Ukrainian capital city of Kiev. Russian drones targeted infrastructure, power sources, and other areas across the city. This comes a week after additional Russian attacks on Ukraine that killed 19. Here to break down how Ukraine is responding to Russia's drone strikes is Talking Points analyst Dominic Chiappone. Dominic, thanks for joining us tonight. Still many unknowns about these attacks. What do we know about the Russian drone attack against Kiev?
You said it best. There are many unknowns. The one known thing we know is that after a big counteroffensive by Ukraine, Russia strikes back with an attack of their own. What we do know right now is that the attacks on Kiev took place at 6:45 a.m. local time for Ukraine. A lot of the drones used were Iranian-made drones. 42 of them were sent to the area, 30 of which attacked the capital city alone, and 36 of which were eventually shot down by Ukrainian forces in the sky, an additional one on the ground. A lot of them target key energy sources and infrastructure, a big strategy that Russia has been going for, and the response so far is that Ukraine is calling for Russia's expulsion from the G20. There's not many takeaways because, again, there's still a lot to unpack. By far and away, though, the easiest development is Ukraine has had this counteroffensive for what's been months now. Russia now strikes back with an attack of their own.
And before this, 2 days ago, 2 attackers killed 11 Russian volunteers, injuring 15 more. What's the correlation between Russia's response to the attack and a recent drone strike against Ukraine?
There's a big one, and it primarily involves the Russian media. You have to think of it like this: 11 dead, 15 wounded, 2 of which were the responsible volunteers of Russian volunteers who committed the attack. You have Russian volunteers attacking a Russian base in Russian territory. That says a lot about how Russia has framed a lot of these attacks, because they are calling both any attacks like this as well as the general Ukrainian population, quote, terrorist. And as a result, when you frame this entire blanket of people over terrorists, you escalate the conflict, therefore, which has led to a lot of the proceedings that we have seen, a lot of the accusations of human rights violations. That has had a big impact on how how Russia and Ukraine have both addressed this conflict.
And Russia's war on Ukraine has gone on now for nearly 8 months. What's the latest on where things stand between the Russian forces and Ukrainian forces?
If there's one thing that recent developments have shown us, it is that a lot can happen in very little time. We have seen since the last Talking Points episode, and even just over the weekend, how much can happen in just a few days. The bottom line is that Ukraine's counteroffensive is still pushing eastward as they're pushing back Russian forces. And additionally, the Ukrainian strategy of attrition in this war has given a lot of problems for Russia. But at the end of the day, what we've seen from recent Russian actions is that Ukraine is simply not dealing with this anymore. This is how the ambassador to the United Nations responded to some of these recent attacks by Russia. Take a listen.
Dear Mr. President of the General Assembly, dear Secretary General of the United Nations, dear heads of states and governments, dear journalists, nations of the world, Ukraine wants peace. Europe wants peace. The world wants peace.
So you can see right there President Zelensky addressing the big theme that Ukraine wants, which is stability, peace, and their land back. Obviously, similar to a lot of our Talking Points episodes, we'll have to be on the lookout to see how this conflict further develops.
And we will. We've been following it since the beginning of the war, and we'll continue to follow it for you. Talking Points analyst Dominic Chiappone, thank you. Next on Talking Points, election night in America just 22 days away. Teagan and I, we're capping the latest headlines from this past week. Stick with us.
My big man fingers are having a problem with these little tiny buttons.
Whoa, watch it there. Your blood pressure's gonna go through the roof.
Tell me about it. I'm trying to learn how to get it down. Instead, it keeps going up.
High blood pressure can increase the risk for heart attack or stroke. Learn how to keep yours at a healthy range.
Ever hear a voice command? Just say text barbershop to 97779.
That's not what I said.
Just give me that. Now my blood pressure's up.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Lee Zeldin, the Republican candidate for governor here in New York, was endorsed by Trump over the weekend on his social platform, Truth Social.
Incumbent Governor Kathy Hochul responded to the endorsement by saying Zeldin has, quote, enabled and embraced the former president's extremism. Zeldin was one of many House Republicans who voted to object to certification of the 2020 election on January 6th.
Zeldin released a new campaign ad on Friday promising he, quote, will not change New York's abortion law if elected governor. The polling average from 538.com puts Hochul ahead of Lee Zeldin by nearly 12 points. Now, Chile, this really makes you wonder if, since Zeldin has former President Donald Trump's endorsement now, if we'll hear anything from President Joe Biden, because currently Hochul does not have any endorsement from him.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point there. And I think one interesting point, too, from that Siena poll, I believe Kathy Hochul had 11% unrecognizable notice among her name, among people who they polled. So I think talking about Mr. President in terms of trying to boost those poll numbers up for Election Day, she may need that endorsement to come in.
It'll be interesting, too, to see how on October 25th the debate has an impact on this, because I believe also on that poll earlier today, it said that 7% of those voters were undecided. So it's the question of if that one debate can answer their questions.
And I think at this point, you know, wherever that swing comes from the undecided is going to put one of them over the top, whether it boosts Zeldin or whether it propels Hochul even more than she already is up in most of these polls.
Well, we'll have a great election special coming up on November 8th where we will have those answers. But that's all the time we have for you on this episode of Talking Points. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News and like us on Facebook. I'm Teagan Brown.
And I'm Chilekasi. Adele. We're back next week, same time, same place. Until then, good night.